as I've shared about 100 times, and I'll share 100 more, don't worry. I grew up in a very Catholic family down in Wichita, very Catholic family. I'm the fifth of 10 kids, if you've never heard that. So if that didn't tell you anything from the get-go, like you should know by now. Yeah, very stereotypical big Catholic family there. But it was more than just the stereotype, and that's kind of the point. We didn't just there's 10 kids, oh, they must be Catholic. It was more than just that. I was very intentional, as Deacon Nick has already made fun of me for this summer, and man, I'm going to get him back one of these days. As he's already pointed out, yes, my family did base off our daily routine, our daily schedule. We based it off of Benedictine monasteries. I've said that before, and again, it's not a big secret. We would wake up and we would go to Mass at 7 a.m., pray before breakfast, eat breakfast, do our work in the morning, pray before lunch, eat lunch, do our work in the afternoon, pray before dinner, eat dinner, pray a rosary as a family every evening, and then pray before we went to bed. Okay, so we just structured our day, as Benedictine monks do, around work and prayer. It's just what we did. I've also shared before Sundays, like the way that we reclaimed Sundays as a family growing up, and how Sunday was such an important part of our lives. And to this day, again, 10 out of 10 of us, which is just a mind-boggling stat. The more I'm a priest, the more I realize that this is just ludicrous, that this is true. But 10 out of 10 of us still practice our faith, and it's crazy, right? And even more than that, like my oldest brother, he's a third-order Dominican, and he teaches the philosophies at the seminary down in Wichita. So like Deacon Nick had him in class for 3 years. I'm a priest. My younger sister's a nun. The brother right under us is going to be ordained a deacon here in a couple of months. And I don't say this to say, man, look at us. We are holy. Because Deacon Nick will also tell you, I'm sure next week, how that is not true. We are not the holiest bunch. And yet, we're striving for it. We're striving for it. The question that me and my siblings get all the time, though, is, and this is the predictable question, the question that we get all the time is, can we meet your parents? What did your parents do? And I get it. I do get it. Again, I'm not even going to stand up here today and canonize my parents. They're flawed, just like the rest of us. But it is true. If you ask us, any one of our siblings, at any time of the day, we will point to our parents and say, yeah, it's them. They're the ones that got us to where we are today. They're the ones that pointed us in the right direction. They're the ones. This didn't happen by accident. I know when you see 10 kids, you're like, that was probably an accident. No, that didn't happen by accident either. But no, the fact that we live our faith is not an accident. It is not an accident that the faith was very intentionally, very seriously placed at the center of our lives, our entire life long. My parents made this very real, very serious, very life-altering decision to do that, and to place our faith at the center of our lives. And I've told you before a lot about my dad and why my dad did that. I've told you about how he had this great admiration for the Benedictine monks, so there's that. I've told you before, too, about how he had a big conversion in his life around Sunday, and how he began to live and helped our family to live Sunday in a much more intentional way. I don't think I've shared with you as much about my mother. Because my mother, too, she also had a big conversion in her life. I've shared before, my mom grew up down in Nickerson. She's from around these parts. We don't make fun of her for that, but she's from Nickerson. She grew up, and even when she was a kid, she was telling people, I'm going to have 10 kids when I grow up. And they looked at her and said, sure you will. We'll let you talk to us about that later on. But she did, proved them all wrong. As she started having kids, though, she did exactly what every other mother does. Right? She started taking her kids to school, signing their kids up for all the activities, soccer, dance, music, recital, whatever it is. And if you asked her, especially in her early years as a mom, she'd tell you what I think a bunch of moms would tell you. She said, well, I just want my kids to grow up to be happy and healthy. It's like, of course, what mom doesn't want that? Beautiful, great. But my mom, she had a big conversion about what it meant to be a mother. And it happened when my oldest sister was 5 or 6 years old. So I would have been either just born or my mom was pregnant with me. What happened is that down in Wichita at that time, there was the big story, really just consumed the news. But there was this young girl that was kidnapped at the time. She was about 5 or 6 years old. This would have been, again, the early 90s. And so she was walking from one house to the other, going down to the neighbor's house to play with one of her friends. And she never made it. Right? She was kidnapped. And so this just hit the papers, this hit the news, and this was just, it consumed the mind and the imagination of Wichita for a whole week. Right? Everyone's thoughts and prayers were centered on this little girl. Very, very tragically, her body was discovered about a week later, just in all states of violation and violence, just cast aside in a ditch on the side of a road. Okay, so this was a very powerful and very striking moment for my mother because she herself had a daughter that age. So it really, really hit my mom, really touched my mom. And what happened and what struck her was just a simple fact. She told me this later. Just a simple fact. She was like, I cannot guarantee the happiness or the health of my children. I can't guarantee that. Right? Maybe I can protect them. Maybe I can provide for them. Maybe I can make sure they get the best education, and I can raise them to be good and kind and compassionate kids. I can help them to be successful in academics and sports and whatever else it is. I can make them and help them to be just the ideal people that everyone would want to be around. But I cannot prevent something like that. I cannot guarantee their health and happiness. I cannot guarantee that they won't even just, be in a random freak accident that will take their health and their happiness away. I can't do that. Okay, so what happened is my mother made a very real, in that moment, my mother made a very real and a very concrete decision. Right? All that I can do, she would say, all that I can do is to point them to God, to point them to Jesus Christ, because only He can guarantee their happiness. Only He can do that. My job is simply to lead my kids to heaven. Okay. That was the decision that totally changed how my parents began to just continue to raise us. What we said yes to, what we said no to. And everything in our life was based on that decision that my mother had made. Because again, this is our call as a Catholic, as a Christian, right, is to help our children, but even just those people around us, to focus on that fact. Everything else is going to fade. The only thing that we know will not fail, it's God Himself. In our readings today, especially our first reading, what we discover is how disastrous it is when that's not the case and when we don't kind of organize our lives in that way. We had our first reading from the prophet Jeremiah, and just real quick, like we all know Jeremiah. Jeremiah was not popular, to say the least, but Jeremiah, he lived and prophesied at a time in Israel's history, in the people of God's history, when everything was falling apart. God had rescued them from Egypt and slavery in Egypt. He'd brought them to this promised land. But then, as time went by, the people began to just kind of scatter and fall apart. What happened is the people began to do what everyone else around them was doing. All the other nations that surrounded the people of God, they began to just kind of start going along with that. They decided, just like everybody else, right, that we just need to focus on money, focus on gaining status and influence and power, pleasure, fun, whatever it is, that's going to be the most important thing. And so they began to abandon the way of life that God had set up for them. Now, they weren't terrible people. It's easy to read the Bible and be like, oh man, these people are terrible. But no, just think about it. I think we can really identify with what the people were going through, which is everybody else around them is doing things a certain way. And so Israel's like, let's just do that. Like, let's just do what everybody else is doing. That's nice. Like, let's just kind of live our lives that way. But again, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, even to the point that they were sacrificing their own kids, like on altars, like literally killing and sacrificing their own kids. How in the world did this happen? Again, God had set up this perfect little place for them, set them up with a perfect little life, but within a couple of generations, it had all just fallen apart. How? How does that happen? Well, that's what Jeremiah is pointing out for us. As Jeremiah points out, the issue is the shepherds, the leaders, the kings of Israel. The leaders, the shepherds of the people, had begun to lead their people astray. Instead of calling them back to this way of life that God had set up for them, they were just like, yeah, just go do your own thing. That's fine. That's fine. Just go for it. They'd become, and they'd really set a bad tone there in the nation at the time. And ultimately, what's going to happen because of the leaders and their lack of intervening in the lives of the people, These people are going to end up exiled from their land, enslaved to another country, and they're just going to be stuck in this land that they don't want to be in. Okay. The thing is, this isn't just like a history story of what happened to the people of Israel or the people of God 3,000-ish years ago. This is something that still happens to this day. I shared a couple weeks ago the persecution that we face as Christians. It's not going to be a violent persecution where like Canada is going to invade us and try to take us off into Canada. Like the persecution that we're going to face is much softer. It's much more subtle. This is why I bring up that man from China all the time. Like the persecution we face is very, very, very subtle. What happens is just like the people in Jeremiah's time, what we do is we just start going with the flow of everybody else. And it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look terrible until all of a sudden we wake up one day and we realize, where the heck are we? What happened? Where are we at? Okay, it leads to destruction. So I think we can easily slip into this. We can easily just start going along with what other people are doing. And with the best of intentions. Again, are we all terrible people here? No. Maybe not. Probably not, though. We're not terrible people, but it's easy for us just to start going with the flow of everybody else. And going with the flow means work and career and sports and 4-H or whatever else. That begins to consume our time and attention. And all of a sudden we wake up one day, typically when our kids are 30, and we're like, wait a second, what happened? How did we get here? We're in a land we don't want to be in, exiled, enslaved to things we don't want to be enslaved to, and we should just recognize maybe we sacrificed our kids to the flow of things. It's easy to do, very, very easy. Okay, so into that situation, what does the Lord do? What does the prophet Jeremiah say? He says, God says, stinks, have a good life. No. God says, I will send you a shepherd. I will send a shepherd to take care of this. This is our great comfort, is that even though we've made mistakes, even though things have gone wrong, the Lord doesn't say, good luck. He says, I'll send a shepherd to fix things. Just trust him. Just trust that shepherd, and he'll get you there. The Lord says, thus says the Lord, I will appoint shepherds. I will raise up a righteous shoot to David, and he shall reign and govern wisely. This is what the Lord promises to do. As our psalm says, again, that very famous psalm that everyone knows, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. There's nothing I shall want. I don't need to fear. The Lord's going to be in charge. So the big question for us then is, and it's a simple question, the big question for us is, will I follow that good shepherd? Or will I just follow the flow of things that everybody else is doing? And I know you know the answer to that question, so we're not going to talk about that. We all know the right answer, I think. Okay, good. We don't need to talk about the right answer. Yeah, follow Jesus, thanks. The challenge is, in this time and in this age, following the shepherd isn't easy because it's a little bit countercultural. And when we begin to live not with the flow of things, it can get kind of difficult. And that's where the challenge is. I know you all know the right answer to follow Jesus. The challenge is to continue to follow him even when it gets tough, because we can't just go with the flow of things, do what everybody else is doing, and then go to church on Sunday. Like that's not going to cut it anymore. It's just not going to do it. Again, our culture is designed to suck the life of faith right out of us. Insert story of the man from China. So especially as parents then too, as parents, right, you've been given this most precious and this most sacred of responsibilities because the Lord, ready for this? The Lord has said, I want you to be a shepherd of your family. Yeah, every one of us is called to entrust our lives to the good shepherd, but especially to parents, you've been given this beautiful responsibility, this precious responsibility as shepherd in your families. And as much as I like to toot my own horn, and I make Deacon Nick just talk to me and really pump me up every day. That's one of his jobs this summer, is to tell me how great I am. It's a great job he has. As much as I like to toot my own horn, my influence in the lives of people, and especially in the lives of your kids, is so small. Statistically, your influence in the life of your child is 1,000 times bigger than mine is. 1,000 times bigger. which means your role is 1,000 times more important than mine. Right? You're called to be that shepherd of your family. As parents, you have this irreplaceable role as shepherd in your family. And so you have to ask yourself, right, where am I leading them? Right? When I make decisions about what we're going to do or what we're not going to do, does this decision place God at the center of everything? Am I concerned about my kids just being happy and healthy? Or am I concerned about giving them just everlasting happiness and holiness in life? Am I just going with the flow of what everybody else is doing? Or at certain times do I say, but we have to kind of draw the line here, and sometimes we are going to have to go against the grain. I love giving you practical examples, and I'm going to give you more throughout this year, but just one I want to call our attention back to is this simple practical thing of reclaiming Sundays. Right, next Sunday is the fourth Sunday, so this is always a great time to bring it up. I'm going to beat this drum every week. Not every week, every month. We're just going to keep beating this drum of reclaiming Sundays. Why? Because if we truly reclaim Sunday as a day for the Lord, as a day for rest, as a day for family, instead of a day for work and for getting ready for Monday and the Chiefs and grocery shopping and whatever else, if we truly reclaim Sunday as the Lord's day, this will begin to transform everything else. And I know that, one, because many of you have already begun to do this, and you share with me that that's happening. That's beautiful. The other way I know this is because Carla and Linda, we're already getting calls in the office from other parishes in the Diocese of Wichita, but even from other parishes outside of the state, wondering what in the world we're doing here when it comes to reclaiming Sunday. And so even when you don't think it's that influential, like, people do take notice. They take notice when we begin to live this way. So the biggest thing that I want to say today is just to not be afraid. In our day and age, the greatest virtue that we need, again, I know you know the right answers, but the greatest virtue that we need is simply the virtue of courage. We just need the courage, the boldness to continue to live this out. It's going to be easy to be tempted in fear to not do things, right? It's the fear of being left out, the fear of missing out. We all talked about FOMO. We talked about that before. It's the fear of people judging us. It's the fear of the fact that kids are going to be upset because we don't do all the things we used to do. It's going to be the fear of people talking about us. And I won't give you my mother's phone number. She'll come visit one day. You can ask her. But you can ask my mother if that was present even back in the 90s when life was perfect. And she will tell you that was true too, right? She will tell you that, yeah, you are going to miss out on some things. Yeah, your kids aren't always going to be happy. We weren't. Your kids and people are going to judge you and think things about you. But in courage, we just have to persevere and continue to follow the lead of the Good Shepherd. That's our call, right? This is it. Like, with courage to follow after the Good Shepherd, with courage to lead those around us, to lead our families after the Good Shepherd. And then what happens is we become those saints, those people that God has called us to be.